All right, welcome to the first of its kind, world-changing manufacturers network. Lisa Ryan has her ears to the ground and her heart in the game. Get ongoing education and new connections right here with Lisa and the Manufacturers Network. Buckle your seat, listen, and spread the word. Here's Lisa.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. Excited to introduce our guest today, Brent Hagan. Brent is the Chief Supply Chain Officer at Lob, where he leads logistics, supply chain, and operations strategy for the platform powering billions of personalized mail pieces. With experience spanning Deliverr, Amazon, and Eaton, he specializes in scaling complex logistics systems, optimizing supply chains, and bridging traditional operations with SaaS innovation. So, Brent, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
So share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to doing what you do.
Sure, yeah. At the school, as you noted, I started with Eaton in an early executive development program. The premise of that program was to teach engineering students coming out of school how to be human beings and manage people and not just be really great designer of systems. From there, I got into private equity manufacturing, where I did a lot of work on operational due diligence, post-acquisition operations integrations was my specialty, and leveraging Lean Six Sigma principles in order to do that. From there, I got into e-commerce fulfillment with Amazon, where I learned really about how to scale businesses. And I worked in the robotic fulfillment network, which are those really enormous buildings off the side of highways that are 2 million square feet, 5,000 employees inside of them. So each one of them very much their own unique ecosystem. Moving into Deliverr was founded by an ex-Amazonian with the premise that we could create delivery speeds without the heavy fixed cost required by Amazon to build that network. So leveraging AI and machine learning in order to accomplish it. And all of that really came full circle, all of my experiences into doing what I do now for Lob. How do you integrate first and third party supply chain so that they interact seamlessly to create a phenomenal customer experience? It just happens to be in the direct mail space, which is one of the more tenured industries, we would say, in North America, where innovation has been stagnant for quite some time, which it's our thesis in the space that it's ripe for disruption as a result of that.
Well, that's awesome. You mentioned the Amazon having 5,000 employees and those huge things. I was always under the impression that because of all the automation there, they had a lot fewer employees than that. So that's surprising.
Yeah, each one of those buildings is capable of doing, and there's lots of different kinds, right? Like you see the smaller ones that are the size of a standard warehouse that you would see anywhere else. They just happen to say Amazon on the side. Those might have 200 to 500 employees, something like that, which don't get me wrong, like that's still a really large number, but the really large ones, the really tall ones that you see at any point in time, there's probably 800 people on shift there. It was 5,000 in total. They've got 155 salaried managers on site in general, and then typically about 13,000 robots as well. And they're capable of doing 1 million outbound orders a day. So just really significant scale.
Wow. And I think about these big warehouses going into neighborhoods where it's hard enough to find 50 people to join your team, much less finding 5,000 people to come on board. And then, of course, taking those employees for all the other businesses in that area that also need them.
No doubt. Yeah, it can be a real challenge. There's a lot of research that goes into where those buildings sit and that geography's ability to sustain a workforce. And there are certain areas where that becomes a real challenge. And when we launched the building in Des Moines, which is how I ended up in sunny Iowa in the first place, but we're still here and we've chosen to not leave, and it's a wonderful place. But when we came here, it was in a very small town outside of the metro of Des Moines. It was one of the big things that was a top of conversation. And I immediately joined both the local Chamber of Commerce and sat on their board, as well as the larger Des Moines Chamber of Commerce, which supports all of the local municipalities. And they all have the same questions, right? Are you going to rob from our workforce? And it's an important problem for everyone to solve together for sure. And a lot of that takes new infrastructure that cities hadn't seen before, right? Like maybe direct bus routes coming from more highly densely populated metropolitan areas directly onto that campus, where historically it would, if there was public transportation at all going into that area, it certainly wasn't going to be like a one-shot deal from certain geographies 15 minutes away to that one. So it definitely takes the full community. But I think what's most important in those scenarios is that Amazon leave that community better than what it found it as a result.
And it's interesting that you had those conversations with the chambers in your area just to make sure that you were basically doing the same thing, leaving it better than you found it, but also giving them those other ideas of bus routes and different things that they may never have even thought about. But as quickly as things continue to change today with technology and everything else that's going on, those are questions we need to ask each other.
Well, I think so. It's critical to me when it doesn't matter if it's Amazon or it's another large manufacturer or DC or whatever going into a community, because we dealt with the same thing when we were looking at first-class facilities with Shopify after the Deliver acquisition. I'd said it before, it's critically important to me that we leave the community better than the way in which we found it. And you want the people because a lot of people move into the community as a result of a business like that popping up. But for the ones that have been there for a really long time, whether it's your hourly workforce or the new white collar people that you've hired, they should feel the sense of community entering in that building as well and how you're supporting it. They should see that their kids' educational systems have gotten better as a result of it. They should see community outreach programs that have been set up as a result of this business entering into the community. They should see that there's more technical resources for training and development to enter into that workforce or to exit that workforce. And that stuff starts to show and really resonate. And I think that's how you generate stickiness as well with your population of people.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you've seen a lot of different supply chain operations between Amazon, Deliver, and Lob. So then you started sharing a little bit about this, but these are very different environments. So how has it shaped the way you think about building resilient and scalable supply chains today?
Yeah, they're all different, unique experiences for sure. With Amazon, it was all about scale and standardization. As you stated, and what most people already know, those are highly automated environments. But as I noted, you also have a boatload of people inside of them every day. And you could have 2 shifts a day or 3 shifts a day. You could have a total of 5 shifts across the week operating 24/7. How do you ensure continuity in your approach to problem solving, and not just problem solving, but cultural engagement across a very complicated shift structure like that? And how do you standardize that approach, standardize the way that you want to engage? And one of the pieces that I talk to folks about a lot is the amount of ownership or autonomy that I give my teams to establish that. But with that sort of autonomy comes ownership of owning the outcome and the inputs you're going to execute to generate those outcomes, and ultimately accountability as well. And so those are the guardrails that I'm going to lay out for a team to drive scale and standardization, right? And that starts with every day, what went right, what went wrong, what did we learn from it, and what are we going to do in the future as a result of these things that we've learned? Our ability as operators to answer those questions in a timely manner and very consistently is ultimately what's going to determine how great of a business that you are. And that I talk to people all the time that want to understand, how do you do that? And it's like, that really is the secret sauce. Hold yourself accountable to the results and do something, right? Like you don't always have to have the smartest group. They don't always have to be Harvard MBAs. They do have to be accountable though, and say, this is what we're trying to do. This is what we think we're going to get as a result of it. If that works, great. We're going to iterate on that. If it didn't work, we're going to take those lessons and try something else. And that sort of resiliency and accountability goes really far. And that was something that I learned a lot at Amazon. At Deliver, it really came down to speed and agility. We operated on an entirely third-party environment, and I wanted to be able to dynamically route inventory all over the country based on the algorithms that we had set in place and what we were trying to achieve. And I needed an infrastructure that mimicked that of Amazon's without, again, the complicated cost of doing it. And a lot of that started with the regionally deployed inventory that we had set up and creating standard as a nationwide network, but understanding that problems are really going to get solved within the region. And so how do we, from the bottoms up, treat that infrastructure to have that decision-making right there? And anything that happened outside of the region, we should really manage as a quality kind of defect rate, right? Because it comes at an incremental cost. And actually, not so surprisingly, that's actually how Amazon in the last 2 years has rebuilt their fulfillment network as well to begin modeling a lot of those same decision points. And then for Lob, it's really about orchestration at scale. The direct mail industry is highly fragmented. And you have businesses that are really good at order ingestion all the way to manufacturing, and they're really bad in the middle and final mile and injection into the USPS. And then you have others that are experts in the key middle of getting work in and out of their buildings. But even if they have 15 buildings, those buildings are siloed in their approach. They might have separate, in a lot of cases, they have separate sales teams. They have separate WMS systems, separate ERP systems. They don't talk to each other. So you're managing your own inventory and you're on an island. And again, this transportation piece can be wildly complicated and they're not very good at it. And so what I wanted to be able to do is say, like, how do you begin to take all of those systems that some are good at, others are bad at, some are great at, others are bad at, no matter where it's at within the value chain, and leverage those partnerships for what they're great at, leveraging our technology, and forget all of the rest. I don't want to use you for this. I only want to use you for this. And our ability to do that has led to us being able to operate at incredible scale with unit economics that mimic that of some of the largest manufacturers out there, even though how we manage our costs is significantly different than how they manage theirs. And we have to pay a third party to do it. Right. And so that's been the really challenging problem for us to solve. And it's been a lot of fun doing it.
And there's still a lot of really old thinking in the more traditional industries that we are in, manufacturing and distribution, that really haven't gotten to that point of modernization. So what do you see as the biggest opportunities for manufacturing leaders when they're applying digital tools and driving efficiency and cost savings?
Yeah, you have to pick the right approach. I think it starts with that. What problem are you solving with technology? I'll give you a really good, probably really applicable example to your listeners. Not everybody, a lot of people think that it's really great to have these beautiful Gemba boards that are made out of TVs or intelligent pads or whatever sitting on your shop floor with these gorgeous graphs that were generated out of Google Sheets or whatever it might be, or being pulled out of their ERP system. Nothing is simpler than having a whiteboard on your floor that your operator can go up to when something breaks, that at the end of the shift or the start of the next shift, they can go and talk to their cross-function, their leadership about, these were my points of failure today. And then use that data somewhere else downstream to aggregate it to generate a better outcome, and so don't spend your money on the TVs and that sort of thing, right? Spend your money on automation workflows that can begin to streamline systems and how they think about it. Look at your direct versus indirect cost and your variable spend and understand, like, my direct cost, where can I gain efficiencies? Let's do that. Let's leverage Gemba in order to accomplish those things. My indirect cost, is it ripe for automation? What are my most standard processes that I can automate from point to point within my building and remove that waste? Where you've already said it, like, it's really hard. Somebody that's moving to an Amazon building at $18 an hour, is probably pushing a pallet jack in the facility in their last job before they got to Amazon. It's highly redundant water spider work that isn't always super reliable, and you can begin to automate those things. And so people have to think about it, I think, from that way of where am I going to spend my dollar and why? And I think that some of that can be a challenge. Like I've had managers in the past, top executives, as well as I've had partners even in my existing manufacturing network who said, I won't spend $1 on something that doesn't inherently increase my capabilities, my capacity tomorrow. I'm not sure you can look at it that way, right? Like it doesn't just success as a business isn't just the velocity in which you're producing whatever widget is that you're making. I think the true orchestration and success of a business starts with having themes that are established by the leaders. Then the delivery of those results and how we're going to get there is very much a bottoms up exercise. So start really cheap in collecting that data. And I promise you it's going to lead to where your dollar is best spent in automating.
Now, it's so funny. You brought up so many really good points there. First of all, about automating the grunt work so that basically you're allowing people to do higher level jobs, finding out the jobs that they dislike the most and start there when it comes to automation, showing employees that you're paying attention. The whiteboard that you were talking about versus the fancy schmancy television, I think that gives a real type of human connection.
Oh, yeah.
It takes out the technology and it brings us back to the low technology. But the thing that I'm just shaking my head there when you said that they're not spending $1 on anything they're not going to see tomorrow. Workplace culture takes time. I say this all the time in my programs, that your culture didn't happen overnight. It's not going to change overnight. You can't buy an easy button. It's interesting that philosophy is still there, that we're dealing with humans and we expect to buy that next shiny object and all of a sudden everything's going to be great and we're making loads of money.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. It's a multivariable equation to establishing that culture. And that's why I talk that those exercises it's up to the executive team, whether that's the owner of a small business or the 5 leaders inside of a multi-international company that's happening to run one really large site. It's a top-down approach to establishing what's going to be important to the business, but those are almost holistically outcomes, almost always, in terms of what they want to get out of the business. The inputs to how to get there, if you're not doing it from a bottoms-up perspective, starting at the floor, starting with your frontline leadership, your middle managers to aggregate that data across the entire system, you're gonna have a pretty challenging time getting there, honestly.
Yeah, and the other things that we're dealing with, the M&A and consolidation, reshaping supply chains across industries. From your perspective, what do manufacturers need to be thinking about to stay resilient going through this level of change?
Yeah, I think we've hit on it already a couple of times now. When you're doing the M&A activity, one of the pieces that almost always gets left behind, but is one of the number one sources of failure within the post-acquisition M&A activity, is the cultural elements. In fact, I was meeting with a biz dev person not too long ago who was talking about this and talking about his philosophy towards M&A, what was important to him, how does he go through the process? And I really wanted to learn a little bit from him. And he was like, I was like, when do you bring HR in or your people team? When do you start looking at the synergies from company to company? And he was like, oh, that's way later. Get the term sheet done. That's a detail you can solve on the back end. And I'm like, oof. I'm like, if I was going to make a list of wrong answers only, that's certainly going to be at the top of mine. So I think it starts right there in understanding that. But the other piece that you see, especially in industries that become ripe for consolidation, where you see private equity enter in, of which I definitely work inside of one, you can see these integrations get 70% done. And I say that 30% is tying the ERP systems together, having a roadmap, for how systems talk to each other. Even if you don't want to do it today, like they're dollars well spent because of how you can start dynamically looking at your systems to load balance, demand. You can start looking at future consolidation activities. You can start looking at inventory balancing across a much more dynamic and agile network. And people, a lot of times they just say, buying this book of business, I'm injecting this book of business into my existing infrastructure. I'm shuttering this over here and now we're done. And it's like, man, not done. Just
Right.
not even close to done. And so I think that those two pieces are what's really critical for me when I'm evaluating that activity.
Oh, now direct mail, excuse me. Direct mail is probably not the first industry that people think about when they hear about supply chain innovation. So what are some of the unique challenges in the space, and how is Lob tackling them in ways that could inspire leaders in other manufacturing sectors?
Yeah, I touched on this a little bit before, but it's an industry that's highly fragmented, first of all. And you have typically like a Goliath within one part of it, right? There could be a couple of them in the actual direct mail manufacturing itself. There's really only one that's on the logistics side. And that creates a ton of friction within the industry for anyone that's operating a small and medium-sized business, because you look at their inability to be cost competitive with those Goliaths. And so what I've wanted to begin to tackle is, how do you use technology to democratize that? Right. So can we use our aggregate scale and our technologies, which we've very successfully done on the manufacturing side, to connect small and medium-sized businesses together so that they replicate the capacities, capabilities, and infrastructure of a large, like, multinational company without the investment in order to do, right? Like, we bring that investment to the table. On the logistics side, we're building the same thing. Can I aggregate small and medium-sized businesses together to move volume from place to place and inject it into the USPS without having to take on what is a very incredible high fixed cost in order to do it? When you're talking about trucks, when you're talking about the sortation, the middle mile sortation equipment that goes with it. And so it's that thesis in our space that I think is going to be very unique to us. And then you look upstream from us, because remember I had said, like, some folks are very good in the front, some folks are very good in the middle, some folks are very good at the end. No one's good end to end. We feel very strongly that in the middle and in our transportation at the end, that we've built the right technology and infrastructure to complete that. Now the question becomes, okay, great, go all the way to the front end. When you're building a creative, you're building an audience list, can we establish the right partnerships and integrations with individuals who are phenomenal at that to be able to offer a full scale service to any customer? And that's a journey that we just, I'd say, recently started the last 18 months or so, is that full end-to-end orchestration engine, if you will. And I couldn't be more excited about it.
That's awesome. You had mentioned earlier getting involved with the different chambers in your area. You also serve on nonprofit boards like the Science Center of Iowa. So how has the experience outside of these corporate roles influenced your approach to leadership and decision-making in what you do with supply chain?
I think in a couple of different areas. The most direct one is probably quite obvious, and that's that you learn that misery loves company. So every problem that you're having probably exists within that room, right? And so you get a tremendous amount of cross-functional ideation going from those groups on how to solve problems. And honestly, most of the time you end up solving them together. I'll give you a really good example. When I was on a talent development board for the Greater Des Moines Partnership, who manages all of the chambers across the metro area. Everyone had the same talent retention program, right? Like, it's really easy to get someone to move to like a tier 3 city, like a Des Moines, Iowa, for a promotion. It's really hard to get them to go there and stay there forever. That was something I dealt with when we were bringing on 155 managers here. And I wanted to be incredibly purpose driven on how we move people here. I wanted people that had a reason to be in Iowa I didn't promote a single person in order to move here. I wanted them to know that the results of them coming here would lead to the outcomes that they desired. And so that was like the most straightforward approach. The indirect approach or thought process for me related to all these is establishing that sense of community, whether it's an Amazon or an Eaton or anyone else, insert your large publicly traded company. People have questions. There's excitement and reservations about companies like that entering into a new community. The first Eaton building that I worked in had been there for 40 years, and the local grocery store set its hours based on the amount of hours that were coming out of the Eaton building. Right. So if work was down and people were getting furloughed, there all of a sudden wasn't a night shift at the grocery store. And like you have that heavy of an impact. People the plant manager, the general manager of that building, he didn't go out to dinners really locally. He was far more popular and or hated, depending on what time of year it was, than the mayor of the town. He employed 2,000 people in a town of 5,000 people. That's a heavy burden. And people have to respect the level of influence that you have in an area like that. And so getting onto boards where you can start to contribute to greater outcomes within the community it's a non-negotiable for me. It's just a no-brainer. When I was running that Amazon facility, I spent probably 40% of my time outside of our four walls dedicated to trying to contribute to the community in any way I could, whether it was bringing in new talent or how do we revive our downtown to make it feel like San Antonio, who's an equal size, but more of a tourist destination. People feel compelled to come here, stay here, raise their families here. Or we named our site at Amazon after the local community high school, which was the Blue Jays. And if you ever do any sort of research on the spirituality of a Blue Jay and like what behaviors they exhibit and that sort of thing, all of a sudden you're like, actually, wow, like I would love for my business to mimic these characteristics of a Blue Jay. And you enter into the building and we had 30-year-old high school sports jerseys framed in the building, and our flag is sitting there outside of the end zone. We're donating canned food back to the local community. Like all those things need to be done, and the workforce needs to come into work knowing that, like this is going back to a boardroom in Seattle, but we're going to return as much money as we possibly can right back here. Right, like right back into this area. And that's, again, like just a non-negotiable for me.
Yeah. And so important, especially when you're looking at the younger people coming into the workplace, wanting to know that the organization that they choose to work for is making a difference.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big deal. And again, when you have a lot of old thought out there, it's one that a lot of people, unfortunately, still don't get. So it sounds like you're doing a lot of the right things over there. If people did want to continue the conversation with you and learn more about what you do at Lob and just basically learn more about you as a leader, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
LinkedIn for sure. I'm super, super active on there. Brent Hagan, Hagan, and they can connect with me on there fairly easily. And I'd love to talk.
All right, Brent, it has been an absolute pleasure. You're definitely one of my people when it comes to workplace culture. So thank you for sharing so much wisdom with us. I appreciate your being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Love to do it again.
I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network Podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network Podcast. Do me a favor and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can grow this network and connect more fantastic folks just like you. You can either send your buddies to the website at manufacturers-network.com or share the Manufacturers Network podcast on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you and your industry friends hang out. The bigger and faster we grow the network, the stronger and deeper the community we'll all have. Thanks again, and I appreciate you.